Yes, welcome in. The Badgers have lost 4 in a row. They fall at Nebraska, lose to the Huskers for the first time in 12 years, and everything is horrible. Jesse, your comments. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, tough day for Wisconsin out in Lincoln. It did not go the way that they had hoped, certainly not the way that obviously fans would hope, and now we're back in this place where it's you play a very good team, very close, and then you go on the road and get your butt whipped by a team that is allegedly a rival.
44-25, to me, that's another embarrassment for this program. And a lot of it has to do with where Nebraska has been and where people want Wisconsin to go. Let's remember, as you said, 12 years since they'd beaten Wisconsin. They ran across the field and hoisted the Freedom Trophy. They have never touched that trophy in a decade. I knew that this streak, and we all did, was going to end at some point because I suppose you can say all great things come to an end. But in this fashion, against a team that itself had lost 4 straight games and was 0-9 in its last 9 games trying to clinch bowl eligibility, it's even more of a gut punch. And I started thinking about this late last night, trying to rank the worst losses here of the Luke Fickell era. And I'm not going to say that this is the worst, but the problem is losses like this continue to stack up, and even worse. And this is what I wrote about, is that Luke Fickell just does not have any answers no matter what questions come his way.
You've got a great story up on The Athletic. Already read it this morning, locked in. And so go and check that out. It certainly breaks down where Wisconsin's at this point. We're going to get into all that, what went right, what went wrong, and get to your questions as well. Before we do, Home Field is the official apparel sponsor of the camp. They have the best vintage gear you can possibly find anywhere. They have a bunch of new stuff, and now they've got this Black Friday sale, 30% off coming up next week. Is it next week now, or is it this week?
Oh, well,
we say this week. I guess we say this week.
When you say Sunday starts the week, so we can say this week.
So they've got this 30% off from the 22nd. Well, I guess it's already ongoing. Sorry, it's ongoing now through Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 3rd of December. 30% off site wide, everything. And if you just got to use the code BFCM24. I believe that's Black Friday CM24. Either way, go check it out. I'm sorry, go check it out. Ton of new Wisconsin stuff over the last few months, and a lot of good stuff for the holidays leading into Christmas next month. It has gotten late, very quickly here, Jesse.
It has. It's a long season. Sometimes a season feels like 3 years.
Has this one felt like 3 years?
This has been a long one, but I guess there have been longer ones, relatively speaking. I mean, and it's a roller coaster. To me, this is just what college football is, and I think what covering Wisconsin has been for quite some time is an absolute roller coaster.
Well, at least you don't have to worry about going to a bowl game.
Ouch.
No, I'm kidding.
Still on the table.
It feels, I wanted to tweet this yesterday, but it felt a little too negative even for me. But it feels like very possible that that's not the streak against Nebraska is not the only streak that's going to end this year. And the thing is, here's the problem: is they could go 5-7 and still get in a bowl. But that is the most backing in way. I don't know where the rankings are. It depends what other 5-7 teams are and how many 6-6 teams are. If they have holes to fill. Last year they had holes to fill. I don't know. I'm guessing your guy Scott Docterman has it all locked in and exactly what it would look like.
I actually saw something about this. It seems less likely this year is what I would say. You don't know how the final weekend results are going to play out, but there's a lot of teams with 5 wins, and presumably enough of them are going to get to 6 that there won't be any. That it's more likely that there will be some 6-win teams who don't go to a bowl game than 5-7 teams who get in.
So is Wisconsin guaranteed a bowl game if they get to 6?
Oh, I would think so. Look, if you're in the Big Ten and you get to 6, you're in. And I don't know how they make those distinctions, but I'm guessing it's probably from lower tier conferences who play bad competition, poor competition. But I would not the point is, I would not be banking on backsliding your way at 5-7 into a bowl game in this type of year. And I'm glad that you saved that non-post on social media for our show. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's jump into what went right. And for the last month, we have been I have been extremely negative about Braedyn Locke and some of what has happened with him, and personally, deservedly. But when you play well and you do what is asked of you, then I'm more than happy to give you credit for that. Not that he cares what I have to say, but I'm saying, like, give you credit for that. And he had his best game probably since the Rutgers game. Like, you go all the way back, and you talk about the Northwestern game, but it was, you know what I mean? Like, the offense just in general, the Purdue back-to-back games, Purdue and then Rutgers, this was his best game since that stretch.
I thought he was excellent. He wasn't perfect, but for what they dealt with this week as a whole, the story from a positive perspective is what the Badgers were able to accomplish offensively, because this was not easy, as we all know. Phil Longo was fired on Sunday. Then you've got to go play a game 6 days later with a new approach. So Nate Letton's calling the plays. You've got help from all 4 offensive coaches. And the big change, Braedyn talked about this after the game, was going to a huddle offense between every play. And he said that he had never done that before in that fashion. Maybe some special plays on occasion. He said when he was at Mississippi State, it kind of sounded like Mike Leach would punish the offense by making them go to a huddle, which I think is kind of hilarious, but that was obviously the kind of offense that they ran. And he said that he felt like the operation, for the most part, was flawless. Now, I was watching from the press box early in the game, and it felt to me like there were moments of confusion, but to me, that's completely understandable. They had the last 2 years a look at me offense. So you're just used to staring over to the sideline to make sure the call is right or to get whatever the change is from Phil Longo, and he's not there. So now, Braedyn is in the huddle and he's getting the play, and he had the wristband on, and I just thought that they executed at an extremely high level, particularly given the challenges that they faced. He ended up throwing 3 touchdown passes. Bryson Green comes back and looks like the guy that everybody thought he could be with 2 touchdown catches. And Braedyn also drops in a 58-yard touchdown to Vinny Anthony. I know that this streak of throwing an interception in every start continues, but I'm not going to put that one on him. I mean, dude dropped the ball. It bounced in the air. It went to the other team. What more could Braedyn do? So the offense, guys on offense deserve a lot of credit, but Braedyn in particular, because to me, outside of the coaching staff, nobody was under more change than Braedyn, because it was his responsibility to run the offense and have all the plays right and then direct the other 10 guys on the field.
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to the intelligence factor that he has in just pre-play intelligence factor, which is, I don't think anybody has ever questioned at all. And he's gotten praise for it. It's just sometimes in game, but that was not. I didn't think that was a problem yesterday. There were a couple throws that he probably wanted back. There was a shot to Vinny Anthony he threw to the outside that was just in the first half when it was still a game that he probably wants back. It was on the outside, and Vinny, I think, thought it was going to be on the inside, and he couldn't find it up in the air. But otherwise, he had a solid game. It's still very limiting that he can't take off and run, because when you're doing all these RPO actions, and it's not just, I shouldn't say RPO actions, but read option actions, that's very difficult because people just don't have to really respect it whatsoever. They're able to crash very, very hard. But I will say the RPO actions that he was able to hit were very successful, and we know what his favorite pass is. It's one of those slants. I mean, he rockets it in there, and for the most part was on the money against Nebraska. It was a very good performance by him.
I thought he was at his best. Maybe he is at his best when he can make quick decisions and just get the ball out, because that's kind of what it seemed like they were doing early. You talk about some of those slant routes, like first option, or just making a decision quickly, because then you don't have to worry about, is the pocket collapsing, all those things. Do I have to get out and run? where there can be challenges for him. There's one particular play, now I can't remember what it was. Maybe you will, Zach, where he sold a play fake so well. I was following the running back the whole time, and all of a sudden he's pulled the ball and he's rolling out to his left. And I want to say it was a short completion, but I just thought it was such a beautiful play, even though it maybe got lost in the shuffle. I can't give him enough credit for what he was able to do. And obviously they still lost, but this was one of those games where I even said this in the press box, like, you can't put this one on Braedyn. And you can't really even put it on the offense. They scored 25 points. And in a lot of other years, that would have been good enough, or at least enough to give Wisconsin a chance. And I will reserve my what went wrong for the next segment.
Well, I mean, look, you say 25 points. Nebraska scored 24 or fewer against Wisconsin in 8 of the last 9 games. So, yes, in most years, it would have been enough.
And Wisconsin hadn't scored 20 since the Northwestern game. So, like, it had been a month since they even got to that threshold. So, yeah, I mean, I thought they executed at a fairly high level. Now, could Braedyn have gotten some more help in the run game? They started to do some things, though there weren't a ton of big explosives, but they did enough, I felt like, as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, look, the 407 yards that they had was the most in a regular season loss since that 2019 game at Illinois. Which, again, when you're talking about some of the worst losses, and I know you're talking about Fickell's tenure, but some of the worst losses for Wisconsin in the last decade, that game would be on the map for sure. When you go in there as unbeaten and you got a huge game against Ohio State, I think it was the following week or maybe 2 weeks later, and you lose the way that you did when you had the game. People don't want to talk about that. Sorry. Yes, the Braedyn Locke was very good, but he's also got an absolute dude in Vinny Anthony. Vinny Anthony had an amazing game, his first 100-yard game, and he is climbing slowly but surely into the. I think he's got a shot to be one of the top 20 seasons or top 20 seasons in terms of receiving yards, and certainly his per catch average is right up near the top in the Big Ten. He has been a revelation. We talked about Atticus Bertram's earlier in the year about how he was the most improved guy from last season. I think you can add Vinny Anthony to that list as well. And maybe it's so they're just realizing that what they have in him, but I think his route running, his catching, and then just his ability to take a top off the defense is something that we didn't see last year at all from anybody. And now he's been able to do it, and it's been really, really impressive. I continue to be, I wouldn't say shocked, but just so impressed with what he's given them.
He's made significant strides dating back to the preseason or the spring when we were asking Kenny Guyton who the starters would be. And he made it clear that Vinny Anthony had done enough at that point to establish himself as one of the guys on the outside. And he's transitioned a little bit too, because they used to put him in the slot more, then they moved him outside late last season. And he's just really taken advantage of that opportunity. He's always had the speed, state track champion in Kentucky. I know I say that all the time. It doesn't necessarily always translate when you get to college, but yeah, he's got that burner capability that once he has the ball in his hands, he's real difficult to catch, but you got to figure out how to get open first. And they also used him as a return man. That was such an interesting situation too, because they didn't have Hunter Wohler or Will Pauling available for the game. And so you just kind of went down the list, and he's shown that he can do that as well. So he's been extremely valuable for this team.
Yeah, he absolutely has. And he is, I believe, third. I was just looking at the stats here. He is third in terms of yards per catch right now. He's got 35 catches for 633 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has, again, been very, very impressive. And you certainly wonder what exactly, I mean, they can build off of that for next year, assuming he's here, which, again, that's not to say that I think he's not going to be, but you have to say that with everybody now, especially guys who jump up out of nowhere and really impress people. And you would, that's just the thing that Wisconsin and every other team in the country is going to have to deal with. So, but if he's here, that his speed is just such a difference maker, and they don't really necessarily have anybody else at wide receiver right now that really compares. But yeah, Bryson Green had a great game too with those 2 touchdowns. And, another guy that I thought played really well and maybe deserves some more run is Darian Dupree. I mean, you go back these last 3 games, you look at his numbers. His numbers the first 8 games were not good. Like, just in terms of yards per carry and all that good stuff. But he just looks different in terms of how he's attacking when he gets the ball in his hands. I mean, he's averaging over 5 yards a carry through the last 3 games. And I feel like perhaps, maybe, you give him a little bit more run against Minnesota on Friday than just what he got. Again, Tyree Walker, most part, has been great this year, but 14 carries versus 8 carries, I mean, that's not like a huge difference, but I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind seeing Darian Dupree with those 14 carries and Tyree Walker with 10. Actually, what I think the ideal would be 20 carries for one guy and 10, 15 for the other. But when you're not running the ball successfully, that's kind of hard.
Right. I mean, look, Darian's been their guy for a very long time, which is why they were so excited. And we're talking about Vinny Anthony, who's, redshirt junior this year, junior. They want to build for the future in their backfield behind Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones. And so Darian, I think, is showing what happens when you get more opportunities. He just looks more comfortable. That's, to me, what it comes down to. He's always had the talent and the skill set dating back to when we saw fall camp, and he was beating dudes one-on-one and in pass catching drills because, of course, as he said, his hands are certified. But just get him the ball in space, and it's very exciting. I thought this would be a game, honestly, Zach, where we'd see some Cade Yakimelli. I thought, okay, well, if Phil Longo's not here, maybe they just want to give the guy who's averaging 8.3 yards per carry some run. And I think he was the up man on kick return. And all he does is make plays. Got some yardage on it. But tough spot for Cade. But, you're not going to take Darian out at this stage.
No, you're absolutely not. And I think what the offense did without Will Pauling was impressive. I mean, the fact that you didn't have your leading receiver from last year and your second leading receiver now, and the guy that you count on so much in the slot, the guy that Braedyn Locke kind of locks into, especially when a game is perhaps getting out of hand, and he's just going to keep throwing it to Will. But the offense did enough yesterday to win. It wasn't perfect by any stretch. Having to settle for field goals, field goal attempts, is not obviously what you want to do if you're an offense, especially you get that turnover deep in Nebraska territory and you have to settle for a field goal attempt. And what's up?
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Right. But like Luke Fickell says, you can't, he'll say it all the time. We didn't think we could win this game kicking field goals. Well, okay. The offense has to be better in the red zone. I guess they went 2 for 3 in the red zone, but have to take advantage of those situations. They just obviously didn't on Saturday. What else? Is there anything else you want to hit on?
No, we got it.
Okay. All right. Let's get into what went wrong. And I think, we'll get to the kicking. The defense, for a second time this year, coming off a very solid, coming off their best performance against Oregon, but they were pretty darn good against Penn State until late in that one too. And then they just lay an absolute egg against a rival. Iowa put up 42 on them. These guys put up 44 on them. It was a pathetic showing from the defense.
It was a truly awful performance. And it's just so, I think, backbreaking to some degree when the lack of complementary football is this astounding. Because you're right. They played, I think it's inarguable, their best defensive game against Oregon. And sure, they held some bad teams to low point totals, but Oregon, as we know, is the number 1 team in the country. And then you come out and you do this on a day, frankly, where as a defense, you had to know this is a moment where we have to step up because we know everything that the offense has been through this week. And so it should be on us, a unit that has more stability, to rise to the occasion. And Nebraska goes down on the first series and scores a touchdown. Now, Wisconsin's offense deserved a ton of credit, was able to tie it up with a really nice drive. But time and time again, they just could not stop a Nebraska team that had not been very good. And maybe it's Nebraska finding something under Dana Holgerson, who's the new offensive coordinator and was coaching in his second game. But as a whole, these are still the same players that came into that game offensively ranked 99th in the country in total offense, and yet Nebraska nearly rolled up 500 yards. Dylan Raiola nearly threw for 300 yards. Their running back ran for 3 touchdowns, and there are just so many situations where you wonder what's going on. Even the touchdown where they put the backup quarterback in, and literally all he does is run, and he runs around the edge for like a 5-yard touchdown. It's just, it was a bad performance. And I will tell you, probably one of the best talkers on defense who I regret that I haven't spoken to more is Ben Barton. And I think we saw some of this in fall camp. He is willing to say what is on his mind, and he certainly did so after the game. And one of the things he talked about, well, he talked about several things, but he said, like, that's a game. Our offense scores, and he said it was like 27 points, but it was 25 points. He said, holy shit, you do that against Nebraska, and you have to find a way to win as a defense, and we couldn't figure it out. And he's absolutely right, because you just laid it out. All these games where they play Nebraska, if you score that much, you ought to be able to win, and they just don't have an ability to do this consistently. I don't want to say they don't have it in them, because they've done it against some of the best competition they faced this year. Just the inability to do this consistently. And I don't want to blame it on Hunter Wohler not being out there, even though he is their best defensive player. A lot of this was happening in the box too. So it was a disaster for the defense, and leads to even more questions about, is Mike Tressel the answer? Do they just not have the right personnel? Are they calling the wrong schemes? So many questions, giving up 44 points to a completely mediocre Nebraska team.
I mean, mediocre is being nice there.
I mean, they're going to a bowl. They're not bad. Purdue is bad.
Yeah, right. But mediocre would, yeah. I mean, again, it's irrelevant. I'm not gonna. I mean, maybe I'll say some bad things about Nebraska, and they'll jump into this thing like Iowa fans did. But the defense was not good, and I don't know how many more times Mike Tressel or Luke Fickell needed to see those crossing routes run time after time after time. It felt like every time, especially in the second half, that Dylan Raiola went back to pass. He had all day, and then was just waiting for the crossing routes to happen. Hit one of those guys, let him get 7, 8, 9, 10 yards, and be in third or second and short or third and short. And it was time after time. It was just really, really, truly horrendous from Wisconsin's defense. And you're right. We can't just all blame it on Hunter Wohler. But for the entire year, all we heard was, teams are going after Nysier Forkery, or they're going after Xavier Lucas. They went after Ricardo Hallman yesterday a ton, and he didn't have his best game. I'll say that. He did not have his best game. And, when he's been targeted a lot this year, I think back to the Alabama game, and I think obviously to this game, teams have had some success. So you need your best players to play at their highest level, especially when you have your other very good players not playing. And they certainly didn't get that out of Ricardo Hallman, and really just the secondary in general. But it's a tough thing to swallow, because that Nebraska offense has not been very good. We talked about Dylan Raiola and what he had done in the few games leading into this, where he had 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and they didn't make him look like that quarterback.
No, it was so interesting. This first time watching Raiola in person, obviously, the way he can flick the ball so easily. It looks like he's not even trying on some of those 6 to 8 yard passes, but he also had a lot of time. They couldn't make him uncomfortable. And I thought it was interesting. James Thompson Jr. came back and played a handful of snaps, but, really wasn't able to impact the game. And I don't know what I would have expected necessarily, but just wondered, okay, is this guy who's been here for a long time going to give him a lift? And it wasn't enough. But overall, just defensively, it's so poor, and I don't even know what the answer is moving forward, other than trying to keep getting better players. But they have, individually at least, what seem to be good players. It's
do they though? Do they?
Well, individually,
who's sitting there saying those are NFL guys?
Well, like, we've talked a lot about Nysier Forkery and some of the things he's been able to do. Same for Ricardo Hallman. We saw some of the edge guys make an impact. I'm not saying like consistently they're all American level, because I've said that all along. They don't have that, especially in the front. And so they're not able to consistently wreak havoc, but it just feels like they have people that are of quality, and for whatever reason, collectively, they can't put it together. But I mean, another thing that Ben Barton talked about is, and I think this is at least worthwhile, like, they just don't seem to have an ability in a lot of these matchups to bow up when their backs are against the wall. And he pointed to a year ago, the Nebraska game, and I had forgotten this. Nebraska led 14-0 before Wisconsin was able to come back and end up winning that game in overtime to get to bowl eligibility. And I think you and I have both seen over the years where Nebraska's gotten out to some good starts and been in the game. And the defense, certainly, yes, the offense contributes to it, but the defense does enough to just keep them in check so that the offense has time to build. And they absolutely could not do that at Memorial Stadium on Saturday.
Not trying to be a dick here, but when Ben Barton is the guy that's talking, like that to me is a bit of a problem.
Who would you want to talk?
A player? No. I'm saying like Ben Barton is a starter. Ben Barton, and they've had walk-ons be starters before. I'm not doubting that. What I'm saying is Ben Barton an NFL guy?
No, he was a scholarship player out of high school.
Was he?
Mm-hmm. He came in as an offensive lineman. I think they had 5 scholarship offensive linemen. I mean,
it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. He has turned into a nice player. He's not an NFL type of player, and that's what they're putting out there. And they're putting out a lot of that type of player at this point. Guys who are not going to play at the next level. And that to me is as big of a problem as anything. So when you talk about they have individual talent, they have recruited in these last 2 classes talent that you think will be good and potentially have a shot. But I mean, I don't look at, Ben Barton. Kurt Neal was a guy who obviously came in after tearing his ACL. He had some offers obviously before that, but he's certainly undersized. Daryl Peterson has not been the type of player we expected this year. Leon Lowry and John Pius have mostly been invisible until the Oregon game. Jake Chaney has, unfortunately for him, that looked like he's going to be done. And they just haven't, for the most part, gotten elite level play from the guys that they need to. So when you say individual talent, yes, I guess, but this is probably the least talented defense that they've had. I mean, maybe you could say last year, like these last few years have been the least talented defenses that they've had. Guys that are not going to go on and play. The last impact players, and you can talk about Muma if you want to, but it's Jack Sanborn, it's Leo Chanel, it's those type of guys.
I'm not suggesting Wisconsin is some top 10 defense. What I was merely saying is that there are guys who have these moments where you see what the potential can be. Christian Allegro had a 16 tackle game. Obviously, Hallman had 7 interceptions a year ago. Nazir Forkurine's really improved. Like, we see these individual moments, but collectively, it just hasn't come together. And so it's hard to figure out what percentage of the pie is the lack of talent. Are you not putting them in the right position to succeed? Because if you were running a different system, would it be better tailored to their skill set? And I don't know what the answer is. But yes, very clearly, this defense is nowhere near the level of defenses that we've seen for so long here at Wisconsin.
Can I ask you a question? And again, they are different style of defenses because they're asking the defensive linemen to do different things than perhaps that they were being asked to before. But I see so often the people complaining about the 2 defensive linemen thing. And how many defensive linemen did they use under Jim Leonhard? What was their main defense under Jim Leonhard?
It was a 2-4-5.
The exact same thing. And you can call it a 2-4-5, but it's like it's a 4-man front when you have the 2 outside linebackers. But again, they were asking those guys to do different things than they're asking asking defensive linemen now to do. And the fact remains that it's not working because they do not have the talent on the outside. And that's what Wisconsin has thrived off of for how long? With all the outside linebackers that they've sent to the league, they've thrived on that. And they have not been able to thrive on that of late. They haven't had those guys. But I'm sick of seeing the 2 defensive linemen out there all the time. Like, that was their main package with Jim Leonhard and Dave Aranda and Justin Wilcox. Like, that's just what nickel defense is. But sorry, rant over. I see it all the time, and I just like. First of all, they have to match personnel. That's what they're matching. They're matching personnel. That's what they're doing, and then you have to hold up, and they haven't been able to hold up. I mean, I go back to the Iowa game and be like when you know they're running. Yes, it's okay to play 3 defensive linemen and have like a 5-man front instead of a 4-man front. But against Nebraska, you couldn't do that. He threw for nearly 300 yards.
Yeah. I mean, this is the third time they've given up at least 40 points this season. And I know you put this out there, but the last time that happened was 2001 when they did it 4 times and they missed a bowl game. And to me, that kind of says it all. Losing 42-10 to Alabama is bad, but at least you could make yourself feel better about it by saying that's Alabama. But to do it to Iowa and Nebraska, I think this is where a lot of Badgers fans and certainly former players look at this and go, what the hell is going on here? Because it's atrocious.
And some of those former players obviously are ones that haven't played here in a long time. And so that is, they can have all those opinions all they want. I've seen others, some from that played under Paul Christ and some that were on the team in 2022 when he got fired, say stuff. And it's like, you guys had a little bit of a role in that. You don't really get to shy away from that. You had a role in him not being here. So whether it was a mistake or not, the fact that it was a possibility was because the guys didn't play. They didn't draw. They did not. They drew that line in the sand.
And Illinois walked right over it.
And then kept backing up and allowed Illinois just to pound them even more. So irrelevant. That's relevant. I think we're on the same page that a change needed to be made. The change that they made with Luke Fickell, we thought was going to work. And right now it's very, 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 very questionable whether that's actually going to end up being the case.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about special teams too, but I just think the lack of answers to me is really concerning. And again, was kind of my big takeaway post game. And if he had the answers, they'd be implementing them and something would be different. So I want to make that clear here. But when you're asking questions and it's, I don't know. And I've been searching for this for a long time. I just can feel the frustration radiating off him when he shows up at the post-game press conference and says, like, this is getting old. We didn't play well. And you could say that many times throughout the course of this season. It just happened to come after a Nebraska loss. But long-term big picture, that to me is the most concerning thing here, is there just don't seem to be any answers. And maybe some of it is clearly you've got to figure out your offensive coordinator situation and have a power spread where you've got guys who can perform at a higher level. But like, you're 24 games into this in these last 2 seasons. You're a 500 coach. You're under 500 in Big Ten play. And the only thing you've done at a very high level is, at least from the outside looking in, the recruiting. And recruiting hasn't translated to wins because those are young people and it's going to take some time. But in order to give people patience, you got to show there's reason for optimism.
Yeah, I mean, the identity of this program right now is inconsistency. Mm-hmm. And some people will say soft. And that's, I mean, you're certainly more than welcome to say that, but I would say inconsistency. They have shown to be a talented team at times and play well at times, and then they show up and play games like they did yesterday, especially defensively. It doesn't make a ton of sense. That said, when you talk about not having any answers and, just, I'm not going to be body language police, but just watching him at the podium yesterday, I got some tweets or some questions about, he's not going to get fired. Is there a chance he walks away? I don't think so. Like, pull a Gary Anderson and walk away. Like, I don't see that. He's
not that type of dude. No.
Yeah. No. I saw it a number of times. But I just can't see it. I can't see it. Before we do go into the listener questions, special teams.
Woof.
So, speaking about coaching.
Yep.
Apparently 5 yards is pretty significant.
I don't understand this one, and I still don't understand the explanation. Everybody who watched the game saw what happened. Nathaniel Vicos goes out there to attempt a 29-yard field goal. It's the first quarter. The score's tied at 7, and they get a delay of game penalty. And it was like, in the moment, it's like, okay, you as a coaching staff are on the sideline. You clearly got to be watching the clock going down. It's your responsibility if you see that it's not working out to call timeout. And so they get the delay of game. And by the way, he ended up kicked the kick. Field goal goes in. They take the delay of game, moves it back to 34 yards. He misses it wide left. Then Nebraska goes down and scores a touchdown to take a 14-7 lead. But then the explanation after the game was that we had a little something on, which means you were going to do a fake of some sort. And what he said was, so we felt like we were in a spot where we wanted to wait on it because whether we were going to call a timeout potentially, because we wanted to see what Nebraska was presenting. And if we didn't have it, we were willing to take the delay of game. And there's a couple things that I don't understand in that explanation. First of all, if you saw the clock was running down and it wasn't working, you had timeouts to use. So why would you give away 5 yards? And second of all, I didn't see anything on the play that indicated it was a fake because it was snapped and Vacos took the kick. So, I mean, maybe they called it off, which is fair. I want to allow that as a possibility. But it's your responsibility as the coach to see that the play clock's running down and you're going to get a 5-yard penalty. So, yes, maybe you felt like the difference between 29 and 34 was negligible, but Vacos has not been as consistent as he probably should be. And it's just, to me, an inexcusable mistake by the coaching staff that led to a loss of points on your end and gave Nebraska an opportunity to just go down the field and score.
Yeah, not his only mistake coaching-wise. You could obviously say at the end of the half, you're down 21-10. It was 21-10 at that point, correct? Nebraska had just scored. Wisconsin was getting the ball coming out of half. So, take a knee, get to halftime, come back out, and perhaps, go down and score. It's 21-17, and it's a game. Instead, they hand the ball off with 17 seconds left to Tawee Walker, who, for the first time in his career, lost a fumble, and Nebraska recovers. A few plays later, they hit a field goal. It's 24-10 at halftime instead. Not like Wisconsin had any momentum, but that had to have been an obviously significant gut punch there right before the half. And I know Jim Polzin asked him afterwards whether he was thinking about going for it, or as you say, thinking about kneeling it or not. And I am now. Yikes.
Right. And of course, hindsight is 2020. We always like to armchair quarterback, but even in the moment, I thought, what are they doing here? There's 17 seconds left and you're about to get the ball. I know Tawee hasn't fumbled, but what are the odds in 17 seconds, especially if you're calling a run play, that you're going to go, they had the ball at their own 25, that you're going to go 50 yards to even put yourself in a position to kick a field goal? And what
with
was
Tawee Walker.
Yeah. And so, yes, he loses the fumble. Nebraska kicks a field goal. It's 10 points for them in a span of like 20 seconds. And then Wisconsin gets the ball back with like 2 seconds left. And what do? They take a knee.
Yeah, not great. Not great. A couple of coaching moves there by Luke Fickell. Again, Nathaniel Vlachos then missed another kick later on, or I should say he missed it in the first half. So they left 6 points on the field, gave away 3. So it could have been, maybe should have been, 21-16 at the half, and Wisconsin gets the ball coming out. And who knows how the rest of the game plays out. But based on the way Wisconsin was playing, it was not going to matter, whatever it was going to look like. It just was not going to matter. Is there anything else that stood out to you about what went wrong before we jump into what I'm sure, I know are some fantastic and very positive questions to throw out here?
No, let's get to the reader questions or listener questions.
Yeah, let's get to those now. Do we still think Tressel is safe?
I don't know. Too many bad performances. You can at least point to moments where they've been really good, but I think it's a harder decision probably on Luke's part to make than with the offensive coordinator, because they go back and they've had success together. But I can't sit here and say anyone is safe at this point, it feels like.
We didn't even talk about I should have brought this up when we were talking about potential coaching mistakes. Wisconsin had a chance to make it a 2-possession game after they scored when I think it was 34-16, and they kicked the extra point instead. What did Fickell say about that? Off the top of your head.
I honestly can't even remember.
Oh, no, I know what it was. He said
there was more time for the offense to get more points. That's what he felt like.
Yeah, they had time to chase points.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So, yeah, that was another. Yikes.
Of all the egregious violations, though, I don't even care about that one because they were never going to get in the 30s in that game.
I mean, you just never know, right? They could have gotten the 30s if who was the guy that dropped the pass that was picked off? Was that Vinny or was that Bryson? Don't know. Don't care, apparently.
I'll be honest. It was so late in the game. I was already writing my Wisconsin got housed story. So I don't remember.
I have to. I forget that sometimes. I'm
going to tell you this too. Had to delete a line in that story about Braedyn finally going a start without throwing a pick, even though that one wasn't his fault. Couldn't have that in there.
Oh, this is another one I got. Is Luke if Luke Fickell got an offer elsewhere this offseason, do you think he takes it?
No.
My question is, who wants to take him? That's good. That's going to pay him north of $7 million a year.
No
one, happening. Right? Like at this point, someone's like, if Marcus Freeman goes to the NFL, Fick's gone. I'm like, why would Notre Dame want him at this point? I don't understand that. I'm not taking shots at Fickell, but like where he was 2 years ago at this point and where he is now is not the same. Right? Like people would not be beating down his door. He would definitely get a job. There's no doubt he would get a job. It just wouldn't be at the level that he was at in terms of possibilities 2 years ago. I guarantee you Cincinnati would take him back in a second. What I'm saying is in terms of like the biggest jobs in the country, some of the ones that he was mentioned for, whether it was Nebraska or USC or Notre Dame. No, I don't think so. Brian says, so it does matter who calls plays. I'll hang up and listen.
It was a bad look to say what he said, and we discussed it on our Tuesday show. But to me, one of the reasons why I felt like that was such a silly answer is because even if you didn't know it had already been reported, which we did, you were going to get to game day and have the TV crew be well aware of who was calling the plays and put a graphic on the screen of Nate Letton that said, calling plays. And I actually paused it as I was watching the game from the press box on my computer to show my colleagues the graphic of Nate Letton on the screen where it said, calling the plays. So I get he wanted to protect his guys because there's been a lot of criticism directed at Phil Longo, but I also think realistically and reasonably, if you are a reasonable human, nobody's going to look at these two games and blame whoever it is that's calling the plays that had no play calling experience whatsoever, or maybe they had some play calling experience coaching 5th and 7th grade, and say this mess is your fault. You're just trying to hold it together as a bridge to get to the guy who Fickell's going to hire. So, yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a rant on that response, but of course it matters who calls the plays. I think their perspective was it doesn't matter as much now because it's a so-called collaborative effort, and that's fair. It sounds like all 4 offensive coaches met to make this happen, and a lot of the plays that were being called, like it was the same plays that Phil Longo had. It was just a different way of getting them in, but it still matters to some degree.
Someone was asking whether we knew how Fickell did in calling those plays in for the 5th and 7th grade teams.
Should have asked
that maybe
a question.
Yes. Perhaps we do that tomorrow? No. Pete says there was a lot of talk about raising the bar when Fickell was hired. If the Badgers don't make a bowl game, is it fair to say that the bar has officially been lowered?
Of course. Of course it has. There's a part of me that wonders, I mean, look, were the expectations unrealistic for where people thought Fickell ought to be able to take this program when they had not been there, the college football playoff? Now it's a 12-team field, so it's a little different because over the years they would have made a 12-team field on a number of occasions. But so I don't know like what was realistic in that moment, given where Wisconsin was. And clearly the problems maybe ran deeper than even all of us saw, even though there were a bunch of problems with this program. But if you don't make a bowl game for the first time in 23 years, how can you not say the bar is lower? That's just, you want to talk about the standard. And sometimes when we say that, or players say that, they're talking about this standard that right now isn't realistic. Making a bowl game is realistic. And when you're Wisconsin, it ought to be realistic every year. And there's still one opportunity to do that. But that's just unacceptable because you can live with some of these losses to top ranked teams. Now they're losing, and they have been losing for a few years to teams that they consistently used to beat. And some of these aren't even close.
Quarterback was not the issue yesterday, obviously, but how much money do you think Wisconsin put together for a quarterback?
How much will they put together for the next quarterback?
How much could they? It's look,
better start selling Stella Blue coffee, baby.
Right? Yeah, again, the quarterback situation is going to figure itself out here, obviously, in the next few weeks, not just obviously for next season, but for the future and all that stuff. We'll know quite a bit more here in a bit. But the fact remains is whoever that freshman quarterback is, it's not going to matter next year, likely. Probably not. Well, unless they just come in and tear it up. It's going to have to be a veteran. And I don't envision, I still don't envision Braedyn Locke being here or his brother being here or Tyler Van Dyke. Even me, I just don't see it because I don't know that they're the answer to helping this offense. And it also matters who the offensive coordinator is going to be and what exactly they want from that quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a fascinating month of December. Portal season's December 9th to the 28th. So by the end of that month, we're going to know.
Fred says, should they have hired Rule instead?
It's a revisionist history. I don't like, this is the thing is there were people who were not thrilled that Jim Leonard got passed over for the job because of his ties. And I have so much respect for Jim and what he did here, obviously, but nobody was sitting here saying this is a bad fit for Wisconsin when Luke Fickell got hired. So I'm not going to say that. I know Nebraska was interested in Fickell and ended up with Matt Rule, but we're also talking about a Nebraska team that's 6-5. They're not pulling a Kurt Cignetti at Indiana in year one.
No, they're not. Guy Ryan says, what would be worse, making a bowl game at 5-7 because of APR or not counting Ron Dane's bowl stats?
Oh, well, I already know your answer. It is.
You better have the right answer here too.
It is worse to not count Ron Dane's bowl stats.
Thank you.
Real here.
Yeah.
Who am I calling the show with?
Right. It would be a real Fleckian achievement though if they do it. And that's I don't like that. I hate that idea of it. But
I don't think anybody has to worry. If they're 5-7, I don't think they're going to go to a bowl based on where things seem to stand.
It's pretty remarkable that this is the exact same situation that happened last year, just reverse, right? Wisconsin goes to Nebraska at 5-5. Nebraska came here at 5-5. Wisconsin wins that game to get bowl eligible, and then faced a Minnesota team the following week that needed to win that game to become bowl eligible. And Wisconsin went in there and beat them 28-14, and they were not bowl eligible. They only got in because of the APR. So, yeah. Todd says, honest question, was it the best decision for this current team to fire the OC with 2 games to go?
I'm going to say that the answer is yes. I think the timing is. The question is, why didn't you do this before the bye week to give yourself maybe a little bit more time? But if you knew this wasn't working, really, why wait? Other than maybe you think there's some level of continuity that will help get you to a bowl game. This is a lost season. And what matters now, while Luke does say it is about the current players, and that is true, it's also about the future and figuring out what the path forward is. Certainly for him as the head coach at Wisconsin, but how do you have some success? And this to me just gives you the time to start making these calls and figuring out who it's going to be, because as much as Luke wants to say that it's not about whatever happens in December, hey, roster management is one of the biggest things that you have to do the entire year, and it all comes down to a very short time period. And if you want to sell what the future is, you better have whoever your offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach is in place.
Another one here, taking stock of the future recruiting classes, inherited talent, and state of the program, does following fan advice to fire everyone result in an even worse situation of revolving coaching staffs?
Yes. This is why coaches get a certain amount of time, and if it is not better in that time, then they move on. But the last thing you want to do is have a consistent lack of continuity, because maybe you hit one home run, but maybe you just continue to dive into a decades-long abyss. And so you have to hope that the decisions that you're making lead to sustained success, but you're not going to get rid of a head coach every 2 years, especially given how much money is on the line.
John says, what weird shit are you going to say about PJ Fleck next week? Whatever the hell I want. It's my podcast. I could say whatever the hell I want. And he's a weird dude, so I'm going to say weird stuff about him. 4th and 2. Nebraska is selling out to stop the run, and you get stuffed. Really? That's the play call?
Yep. I had that on my list of miscalculations and failures, but it didn't rise to the other couple, and I didn't want to include every single terrible thing they did.
Last one. Honest question. Can this program be saved under Fickle, or is he over his head in the Big Ten?
This is the biggest big picture question that's out there because people want to give him time. They want him to succeed, I think, especially if you're a legitimate Wisconsin fan, even if you're upset about how things transpired and Jim Leonard didn't get the job. But I just really struggle to see what the path forward here looks like. Now, maybe he makes an absolute home run offensive coordinator hire. They spend $1 million+ on a quarterback, or they happen to have a quarterback who's ready to lead them into the future. I don't know that year 3 is going to be any better when I continue to look at the schedule. And I think about 2026 being the year where you absolutely have to show something. And that's still a year. And while it's impossible to predict what a team's going to look like, you got to play Notre Dame. And, you know, you've got to play teams that might be better at that time. You have Penn State, you have USC. Who knows what those rosters are going to look like? But the more this goes on, the more the questions persist about, is he in over his head? I mean, he, again, doesn't have any answers to any of the questions that we're asking, really. And it's hard to see where those answers are going to come from.
If we think it's bad right now, wait until Friday afternoon and them having an empty trophy case for the first time since 2003. Yeah. All right, Jesse, thank you very much. We will catch up on Tuesday as we head into, or we'll catch up at some point this week as we head into the game on Friday, Black Friday game against Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Can.